In light of what went on with schools during COVID, homeschooling is increasingly becoming a consideration for families across the country. But do they understand what the essence of homeschooling really is? There's also a lot of seasoned homeschoolers who don't want school choice. We're going to talk about why that is and more on this special Blue Haired Conservatives episode of Subtle Rampage podcast. Let's get into it.
Warning, the following program contains critical thinking, honest opinions, viewpoints on culture that may seem conservative, and a positive view on absolute detestable things such as marriage and children. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to Subtle Rampage podcast, where I discuss the things that I feel like discussing. Sometimes those are things of a political nature, sometimes they're things of a cultural nature. But, we just go with the flow, whatever I feel like talking about. My name is Adelia Kirchner, and this is my fellow blue-haired conservative and best friend of almost 8 years, Shauna Husky, and she is joining me for this episode. Woo! Anyways, if you have been keeping up with the podcast like you should be, then you know that both Shauna and I are homeschool alumni. Shauna graduated high school in 2018, and I followed suit in 2020, unfortunately. So we're not super directly involved in the homeschool community at the moment. Mm-hmm. However, we both still have younger siblings who very much are, and homeschooling mothers who very much are.
Yeah.
I have 6 younger siblings. One just graduated high school, so technically he's a homeschool alumni now too. So I have 5 younger siblings who are still homeschooled. And
yeah, I have 2 younger siblings. One just graduated, so she is joining the alumni club. But I still have a younger sister who just started high school, so
throughout the amount of time that we have been homeschooled and the amount of time that our parents, our moms specifically, have been homeschooling, things have shifted a lot.
Yes.
Especially in the last few years because of things that have happened during COVID. There's been a lot more people who have deemed themselves homeschoolers. Sometimes that's an accurate term for what they're doing, sometimes it's not. But yeah. My homeschool mother, she homeschooled me from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So she's been doing this for, I guess, pretty much like 2 decades now.
Yeah,
like
pretty much, yeah.
Because homeschooling moms, usually the education starts before your quote unquote school age.
Yeah.
They find the education in everything. That's why they call a lot of things field trips, is because they are making it educational. Trust me.
Yeah. It's not just saying, oh, let's go to the grocery store and it's a field trip. We're just gonna get groceries.
No,
there's more to it.
It's like, go to the grocery store. It's gonna be a field trip. You're gonna learn how to
calculate taxes
and shop on a budget, and you're gonna learn.
Yes.
But yeah, so my mom, and I guess your mom too, is what we would kind of call they're kind of veteran homeschool moms. Okay, they've been around the block for a hot minute, and I guess now at this point too, our moms have both graduated to homeschool students from high school, and pushed them into their adult lives when it comes to education. But like I said, a lot has changed in recent years, and I think how schools and school districts and just the government in general handled COVID, it has a lot to do with how many people are now homeschooling.
Yeah.
Some parents were scared to send their kids to school. Some of them saw their children being left behind because everything was online for so long, and they were like, what is happening here? My kid should not be struggling this much. He should not be being held back because of this. But yeah, so and then some people, they just because of the online learning and the access that they now had to their kids' teachers, their kids' classrooms, they were starting to realize some of the insanity that can occur in a school classroom when there are no parents around. So a whole variety of reasons that you have a bunch of people now homeschooling. But I think both me and Shauna, I assume you agree with me on this. We're all for people pulling their kids out of public schools.
Yeah. I mean, I even have college professors I've had conversations with who are pulling their kids out to homeschool them.
Mm-hmm.
So, if college professors are doing it...
Yeah, the ones who, like, literally spent, like, a huge chunk of their life in academia purposefully to then stay in the realm of academia.
Yeah.
If they're pulling their kids out, you should probably pull your kid out. Not that they're the experts, but...
It's kind of the telltale sign, in my opinion.
Yeah.
To the general public.
But yeah, so, you know, it's not that we're against people pulling their kids out of public schools. I think that's something that's needed to happen for a long time now. And at the rate that it's happening, I'm happy. Like, people need to be doing this. Because at the end of the day, okay, you can try to, like, shine up and polish public schools, but you can do that for the next half century, but public schools are still going to be government-run, inefficient school systems.
Yeah.
It's just the reality.
They're
and
government schools.
Yeah, it's the government educating your children.
And since when did we trust the government?
Yeah.
On either side of the political aisle.
Since
did you trust the government?
Since when did you trust the government? Great question. Great question. But yeah, like, that's why I call them government schools.
I call them government schools.
Yeah, because people forget that is who is in charge of the public school system. It's the government. And do you want the government running your child's life, pretty much?
Yeah, I've actually gotten into many arguments with people over calling it a government school.
Really?
Yeah, just like, no, it's not. And it's just like, who teaches the kids? who provides the curriculum?
I'm like, the government is what everything goes through. I'm like,
yeah, that's the regulation that your children are getting educated through.
Yeah. So it's just it's one of those things. People have an issue with it. I just view it as the reality. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it is good to be pulling your kids out of public schools, but I think the problem comes in when new homeschoolers, they don't realize the struggle and effort that a lot of veteran homeschoolers have gone through simply to have the freedom and the right to homeschool their kids.
Right.
Like, even our moms were coming in on the brink of it, you know, like, things were finally starting to be, like, okay, but there was still so much stigma. But the generation, like, the generation of homeschooling parents, like, right before our moms, they are the reason that homeschooling is legal still. And a lot of people, like, don't really fully recognize, like, just how easy it is for homeschooling rights to just be taken away. A lot of states still have, like, major restrictions on how you can homeschool, which defeats a lot of the purpose of homeschooling. You're supposed to have the freedom to teach your children in the way that you see fit. And it's not always the case. And you have so many people against homeschooling. Okay, like that one lady from Harvard who I've been meaning to do a podcast about. I will do it at some point.
You need to do a podcast.
I promise. It's on my list. It just hasn't hit priority in my brain, apparently. But there's this PhD lady who wrote a whole dissertation on why we should ban homeschooling in the U.S. And it pretty much could be summed up by her saying we need to ban homeschooling because some people who homeschool their kids don't homeschool them and actually physically abuse them. That's what it can be summed up to. And I'm just kind of like, lady, you know how many public school students are being abused? Yeah. And it doesn't get found out? There's all sorts of situations. And no one does anything about it? And even when they know about the situation? Yeah, there's stuff like that. And you know what? I personally know that I would not abuse my children. So I'm not giving up the right to educate my children based off of the fact that somebody out there might be a crappy person. Especially when, if homeschooling is banned, my option is to send my child to go get educated by somebody else. And there are so many things that can happen when your child is out of your care. I'm not personally comfortable with that. Same here.
Like, it terrifies me. Just from the little bit I have experienced in public schools, and then just other stories I've heard from fellow former public schoolers. Yeah. Like, no way.
I could literally make the same argument for public schools. I could be like, you know how many people get abused by their teachers? You know how many sexual assault situations there are with teachers and young students? Okay, yeah. just based off that, we should just ban public schools and private schools and every other educational model. Like, that, it's a stupid argument, but that's pretty much what this lady was saying. And Harvard held a whole anti-homeschool summit. Okay, it was a big freaking deal.
Yeah.
So I will do a podcast on that in the future. It's just, I want to get it right.
Yeah, it's a topic to get very heated very quickly on, just because you've lived as a homeschooler.
Yeah, and that dissertation is long.
Yeah.
Like, Shauna was in town when
I remember. I
printed that thing off, and it just kept printing and printing and printing. It was like this little thick stack, okay? And
I remember all the yellow highlighters.
Yeah, I went through and I highlighted everything that this woman was saying that was just absolute, like, crap. I was like, oh my god, I can't. I'm like, goodness gracious. But yeah, so yeah. there's a lot of that, and people don't realize just how difficult it was for people to get to where we are today with homeschooling. They really don't. So our main goal with this podcast episode, at least when I came up with the idea, it is just to walk through a few big things that it seems like new homeschoolers or people considering homeschooling, or even just those outside of the homeschool community, might not really understand when it comes to homeschooling. And so the first thing on that list is the difference in social expectations and social attitudes when it comes to public schoolers versus homeschoolers. Just the mannerisms, the social behavior of how they interact with other children, how they interact with adults. It's just very different. It's just the difference between how homeschoolers operate versus how public schoolers operate. Like, I see a lot of newcomers who think that everything in homeschooling has to line up with everything in public schooling, like we talked about in a previous episode. Like, they think that it has to be public school
a certain
at
way.
Home.
Yeah. It defeats the point of homeschooling.
Yeah.
Because homeschooling is meant to tailor to your child. And in, like, public schools, it's a generalized curriculum. It's not catered to your child specifically. And it's kind of like a hit or miss type deal. Whereas homeschooling, you have the opportunity to, like, know what your child's learning style is and how to teach them with that learning style.
Like, you don't have to carry over the grading systems from public school. You don't have to carry over the schedule. You don't have to use the same publisher or curriculum company like we talked about in our last episode. Like, there's not one right way to homeschool. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Is you can do it however works for you and your kids, you and your family. Like, there's a million different ways to learn. And so it's one of those things. You can piece it all together to make this, like, super efficient puzzle.
Yeah.
And then glue it together and put it on a frame on the wall. But you get this issue of culture, right? Because homeschoolers have, like, a different culture than people who go to school do.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you had this experience, but I personally had this experience as a Christian homeschooler. A lot of what I did in the homeschool community, since we were in a very, like, I guess in Tennessee we were in the Bible Belt. In Florida we were just in a very, like, Christian community type when it came to homeschooling. But there are secular homeschool communities, and so when I was, like, in my freshman year of high school, one of the extracurriculars that I was able to do was a group of homeschoolers, but I think I was the only Christian homeschooler there.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting, like, situation, because I was not used to being around other homeschoolers who weren't Christian. But at the same time, we had more similarities with each other than we did with somebody who was Christian and public schooled or not Christian and public schooled. Did you ever do anything with secular homeschoolers?
Not that I can recall off the top of my head. I just know that, like, how a person homeschooled acts socially versus a person who was public schooled acts socially in the same age group.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of my experiences when I think about this comes from when we went to youth group. And, like, how interacting with the public school kids was very different, and you knew who the homeschool kids were. Not because they were in the corner.
Yeah, okay, see.
They were socializing.
Some of y'all out there, and I don't think it's a large portion of my audience, but some of y'all out there, okay,
Yeah.
seem to have this idea that homeschoolers are weird, and that's why you can tell the difference between homeschoolers and public schoolers. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret here. I've met some socially awkward public schoolers.
You
some
have?
very socially awkward public schoolers.
It's almost like there's a stereotype for public school kids to be socially awkward.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I thought, according to everybody I've ever spoken to that was not a homeschooler and felt like, insulting me,
Yeah,
like, people seem
honestly.
to have this idea that, like, all homeschoolers are socially awkward, socially inept, cannot hold a conversation, are not outgoing, and it's the most interesting thing to me. Oh, and when they are outgoing, they're weird.
Mm-hmm.
That is what a lot of people seem to think, and that is why they say, oh, I can tell the difference between a homeschooler and a public schooler. And you know what? That's not how I tell a difference between a homeschooler and a public schooler.
Yeah.
Crazily enough, I think when we're saying you must be public schooled, it's not this like condescending thing. It's more so
No.
this analyzing thing
Yes.
of environment and how that affects a person.
And just watching their little behaviors, not necessarily being like, oh, I speak this way and like I am like lower intellectual status. No, that's not what saying, oh, we can tell your public school means.
Yeah. It's got a lot to do with how you interact with people your own age, with people who are your parents' age, with people who are elderly, with little kids. Like, you can usually tell just by how somebody is interacting with all these different age groups whether or not they were put in a school environment. Because, I had a lot of friends growing up who were public schooled who had a really hard time talking to my parents. Like, some of them would never talk to my parents because they were scared of my parents. My parents are not scary people. My dad has maybe gotten gruffer with age, but when I was a kid, okay, we're talking clean shaven, like skinny dad.
Oh, I did know him then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but like even before then, like he was like looking less harmless when I was a kid. So what's crazy to me is like a lot of public schoolers that I knew in middle school, high school, like elementary, they could not have a like normal conversation or normal interaction with people who were our parents' age.
Yeah.
And so that was usually a pretty easy tell for me.
Same here. And just like, not to stereotype public schoolers, but just like the things they would talk about that they would find interesting.
And it's not so much like on the individual, it's more so like environment. Like, if you're around a lot of other kids your age, there are things that are expected. There's like certain
social status.
Yes, there's a certain social status quo. And that's not exactly the same in the homeschool realm. I think there's also a lot more contempt for authority in
a lot more respect
public school. In homeschool, there's more respect.
Yeah, that's how I view it.
Yeah, and it's not so much, trust me, I had a lot of contempt for authority. So I'm not saying that, homeschoolers are like these meek little things and they don't ever have issues ever. I just mean in how they expressed themselves.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, and how you expressed yourself.
Yeah, how you were comfortable dealing with situations that upset you. I think a lot of homeschoolers, yes, there are kids are going to handle things certain ways, but I'm talking more so when you get to high school. Like, I noticed that, the way that I would handle things, the way that some of my homeschool counterparts would handle things was a lot more reserved, a lot more calm, a lot more socially acceptable in the adult world. It would be what we expect of adults versus some of these public school kids who had spent time only in an environment for a good chunk of their lives with people who were their age, and then the authority figures that they did have, some of them were not really worthy of that respect.
Yeah.
There was so it's like, why do I need to respect you because you don't respect me? Whereas I feel like in the homeschool world, even if you don't have that type of relationship with your parents or whatever, you still kind of get that in like homeschool co-op environments and stuff. Like, a lot of parents are still going to interact with other people's kids like, okay, I'm here to teach you, but I want to listen to you too. you know? So it's a very different environment. And so you see kind of how the social environment kind of plays out in people's behavior.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting experience to, like, be able to, like, know in your head, oh, okay, without even knowing beforehand.
Yeah, and there's some subjects that are, kind of across the board. Like, obviously, you get to middle school, the girls are boy crazy, either whether you're homeschooled or not. It just happens.
Yeah.
Not all of us, okay, but there's always that huge group of girls that just all of a sudden is like, I like this person and I like this person. Who do you like?
And, like, you can't have this person because I like them.
Yeah. Gosh, that's kind of across the board, but there were other things like like when it comes to like the sexual stuff, like I know that me and my friends and all of us like at co-op, most of us knew all the stuff that the public schoolers were talking about. We knew what they were talking about. Okay, we knew all this stuff, but we weren't like speculating who hasn't done this or who has done this or who did this with this person. Like that wasn't the lunchtime conversation. That wasn't the what we were.
That wasn't the topic of importance.
No, there were other things that we were discussing, even though we knew that those things existed. And teenagers, okay, there's certain things that people want to do. It just wasn't like the subject of prevalence in our social conversations. There were other things that were more interesting to discuss in public.
In public.
Okay, and like personally, I went to a tutorial, a co-op ish thing. They called it a co-op. It was a tutorial. We'll get into the difference between those two things. But it was a homeschool group, okay, and they held classes. And so I went to that for my sophomore year of high school. And I didn't fully realize it at the time, but looking back, I think I understand why it was such a terrible experience for me. And, I mean, I've always been a pretty confident person, like on the outside at least, as far as like the way I talk with other people, the way I express my opinions. It's just kind of my thing. That's my personality.
You can have that thing.
Okay, yes. Thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I need it for this.
You can have all of mine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I don't know if I want all of yours.
Because
you might want a little bit.
No, I'm good with being quiet.
Oh, okay.
For the most part.
But yeah, so like looking back on it or whatever, I realized that like the reason that I had such a terrible time was just because of the social environment that was present in that homeschool group. And also looking back on it, I realized that the majority of the high school kids that were going to that homeschool group had just recently been pulled out of public school or had been in and out of public school their whole educational career or whatever. So these were people who had been in and out of public school or who had been in public school all the way up until 9th grade, 10th grade, whatever. And so they were still acting very much like they would act in a public school environment. So I got like relentlessly bullied for the first time in my life, which was just crazy to me because I was like, what is happening? I've never been in an environment where people are like this, and it was for, just stupid stuff like, acne, not having nice clothes, God forbid somebody be low income, how dare I wear the same shoes every week? That's apparently not okay. Like there were just certain things that like I just that had never been a part of my growing up experience that I experienced because some of those things are normal experiences when somebody goes to public school. Yeah. So, and they're not good things either. So it'd be one thing if it was like good things that they brought over and I was experiencing, but it wasn't. And the
negative definitely showed through.
Yeah. And the topics of conversation were different because these kids had been to public school and they expected everybody to be talking about who had done what with who. And so they would ask very invasive questions that
didn't need to be discussed.
Did not need to be discussed. And personally, I still feel like that, not because I'm uncomfortable with the topic, with the subject matter,
because they're children.
But because you're children.
Yeah.
kids don't need to be talking about stuff like that. Not in the explicit way that a lot of them do.
Not
You
like
can talk. You have to talk things out.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot of unnecessary stuff that gets said. Yeah. Yeah. But it was a very crazy experience. So the social attitude is entirely different. And, I'll tell you this right now. Kids are kids, okay? Kids are going to be mean sometimes.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether they're homeschooled or public schooled or whatever. I've witnessed homeschoolers, bullying other homeschoolers because, it happened to my brother a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to walk up to these high school boys and be like, why don't you go bully each other and leave my elementary school brother alone? Mm-hmm. So, it's just kind of one of those things, but it's going to be across the board. But I do think that stuff like that, the bullying, the explicit conversation subject matter, it does not happen as much in homeschool environments.
No, not as much.
No. And so, obviously, kids are kids, teenagers are teenagers. There's stuff that comes up, but it's just very different. There's probably also a major difference in how bullying and that type of stuff is handled in homeschool settings versus public school settings.
Mm-hmm.
Like how when you were being bullied in your younger years of public school, who found out about that? What was done about that?
Well, I would go tell the teacher, and then the teacher's just like, okay, and then nothing would happen, and then I keep going to the teacher over and over again every time it happened, and then the teacher told me to stop being a tattletale. So that was healthy for my mental state as a child. And then when my mom would ask me how was school, and I'd be like, miserable, and then she'd be like, why? And then I'd tell her about all the bullies and how I was getting picked on because of what I looked like or what I did or my success in those speed tests we did as a kid. I had kids steal things from me that I had to steal back because the teacher would not help me steal back. During those parent-teacher conferences, my mom would be like, hey, my kid's getting bullied. And I've had teachers bully me, okay?
Yes. Going hand in hand with a recent episode that I did on some certain comments that were made about teachers by Megan Trainor and Hillsdale's president Larry Arnn. They made some controversial comments. Go check that episode out. I'll put it in the cards.
You're welcome for that plug. But yes, I was bullied by my teachers. I remember I was having a hard time because my dad was in the military and he would go away for training and drills and things like that, and I would miss him. And I came into class crying one day just because I missed my dad, and then my teacher told me to get over it and then sent me on the bus home after school and everything, and then sent a note to my mom saying how I need to keep myself together during class.
And how old were you?
I was 7. 7 years old.
We love that. Expecting 7-year-olds to be able to
process their emotions,
not cry. Expecting adults to be able to not cry in certain situations is still a stretch, but expecting a 7-year-old to not cry when they miss their dad, who's been away for a long time,
yeah, especially when there's a brand new family member, because my sister was still a baby, a brand new little baby.
Yeah. Hey, kids have a lot of emotions, and as adults, it's our responsibility to try to help them navigate that, not to shut them down.
Yeah, that happened a lot in public school. I was constantly shut down. Honestly, it developed paranoia in me as a kid, because there's a whole going to the bathroom situation. I felt crazy.
So stupid.
I had to keep going back to the teacher, making sure I asked permission that I went to the bathroom, and the teacher would start getting annoyed with me because I was making sure I asked. But that's a whole different thing. But as a result of the whole teacher telling me to shut up and control myself, Mom went off. And there's also a few minor things that happened with other kids in the class who kind of witnessed this. One of them being my long-term bully for all 3 years, saying how her dad, who was a golf manager, her dad's job was more important than my dad's job as a military man. And like, I know kids' perceptions, things of that nature, but like she would do stuff like that as a comparison bullying
to try to get a reaction.
To get a reaction out of me. And it worked, because of course it would work.
Yeah.
But when so many things like that were happening at the school and nothing was being done about it, that's when my mom found a way to come into the classroom. I don't remember what it's called, but she was able to like be a teacher's helper is what it is, I think. And so she started being a teacher's helper in that teacher's classroom, and it was very, very funny. That's how I started like passing math, because my mom would actually sit there and help me. Not like do it for me or hold my hand. She would like take the time to explain what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time my mom being there, and they were like teaching us how to do cursive, and then they did a timed thing where we had to like write all these letters in the cursive format we just learned, and I was about to be in tears because no one was helping me.
Yeah. And like that's the thing, is like these teachers, I'm like, even the good ones, it's more difficult to teach a classroom of 20, 30 kids than it's ever going to be to teach 1, 2, 3, 7 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, even 12 kids is easier than the classroom sizes that most schools have. And so a lot of teachers, their priority is not necessarily, okay, and don't come at me, okay, but a lot of teachers, their priority is not necessarily coming alongside students, making sure that they're good to go, making sure that they're learning. The priority is making sure that the classroom is in order and that people are sitting still and paying attention and whatever. Even if that means that there's 1 or 2 students getting left behind, it's like there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
So it's one of those situations where, you know, some people are able to teach in a way where they come alongside students, and some people are so focused on making sure everything is in order.
Making sure the majority passes.
Yes.
Like, one of the other bullies I had, he was held back a grade. And I think honestly, I think it was mainly focused on me, from what I can remember.
His bullying,
like kicking me, hitting me, taunting me, calling me names, pulling my hair, all your stereotypical bully stuff. And when I would tell the teacher, I got the tattletale thing, and then like I remember the next day, like after one of the times I was like so done, walking to class, the whole seating arrangement has changed in the classroom. Now me and the bully are sitting next to each other. And when asked, and I begged the teacher to move me because he was kicking me. And
so your bully is sitting right next to you, literally interfering with your classroom time with his bullying, and you say to your teacher, "Hey, can you move me because my bully is literally kicking me during school?"
Yeah.
And she says, "What?"
She takes our desks and faces us back to back, where he's still able to kick me and taunt me and harass me. And that's all she did about it until my mom started being a teacher's helper. And pregnant. This was before my little sister was born. Pregnant.
Did you, is that the same teacher that said that, like, you sitting next to him would make him a better person?
That is the same teacher.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what we're dealing with when it comes to some of the bullying that happens in public schools and some of the stuff that's done about it. I mean, it's been a conversation in school districts, you know, amongst parents. Like, the whole problem of bullying has been a conversation for decades now. We all know this. It's why it's in all these movies and TV shows. Bullies exist. But like, the thing is that when you throw a bunch of kids into an environment like that, there's going to be kids who are able to handle their emotions well, and then there's going to be kids who can't, and their only avenue, because there's nobody directly with them every day during that time, like walking them through their emotions at that age, their only avenue is to take it out on the people around them, and usually the people they can get away with doing that to are their fellow classmates.
Yeah.
So, but then you see in some schools, once they hit high school, you see that more and more happening where the kids are bullying the teachers. And you wonder where that stems from. They're in environments where they're not being taught the things that you actually need to learn in order to function in life. And I know there's been all this conversation in public schools in recent years. I've listened to teachers talk about it, about teaching kids emotional regulation and breathing exercises and things like that. But it's never gonna replace the actual, like, having your children at home with you.
Yeah.
And being present in their lives as a parent and walking them through those things and it being a consistent everyday thing until they are able to do it on their own. It's just, there's no way that sending them to school replaces some of the things that you are responsible for doing as a parent. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear it, but I mean, biblically, as parents, it is the parent's responsibility to teach and train their child in the way that they should go. It is not the parent's responsibility to pawn them off on the state or to pay somebody else to do it. And I'm not saying that you have to be the one teaching, okay? I'm not saying that you have to be the one doing everything, but you do need to be extremely involved in the teaching of your child if you want them to grow up a certain way. It's just the reality. It's not supposed to be the responsibility of the state. It's the responsibility of the parent. Sorry. But, okay.
Oh, okay. Hi! Hello!
Okay, I said we're probably gonna have to make this 2 parts because it's so freaking long.
Yeah, this is a really long episode for understandable reasons. As you will see in part 2. Woo! This concludes the end of part 1. Part 2 is just the Shauna show. It's just me, no Dahlia. Just kidding. I can't do this by myself. But yes, join us in part 2 whenever that is posted.
Yay, good
Woo!
job.